this is Anna. Welcome back to Painting Big. Today we are going to tackle our 28mm faces part 3. We're going to do eyes and eyebrows. Alright, let's get to it. Alrighty, here's our Riel. So for colors today, we've got Walnut Brown, which I always use for eyes on the 28mm if I'm not planning on doing a colored iris, and I'll talk about that in detail in a few moments. We've got our fair skin, just in case we need to do any touch-ups. We've got Pathfinder Osirian Sand. You could also use something like linen white. I tend to use a yellow off-white when I do the whites of the eyes, and I'll explain that in a moment as well. Then I grabbed some Auburn. I figured I would grab a color that I could just block in her hair real quick so the eyebrows will look right. All right? Excellent. So, whites of the eyes. Why do I use a yellow off-white? Because using a pure white is usually going to make the eyes look like they're wide and staring. It's very cartoony, it's very artificial. The only time pure white works for eyeballs is when you're painting a model that has such small eyes that you can barely fit the whites in around the iris. When the whites are just a tiny speck, you need the pure white in order for them to show up at all. But on anything larger, but still 28mm, you want typically an off-white so that it won't look so artificial. And the bigger the model you're painting, the darker you can go with the whites and still have it look right. So this model actually has kind of a gray-white for her whites, but she still looks fine. And this is, by the way, the big version of Little Riel here. So this is Big Riel and Little Riel. This is one I'm working on my Reaper Pro Tips stream. So yeah, our eyes are actually kind of a yellowish gray, the whites of our eyes. So I tend to go toward the yellowish with my off-white and then toward a yellow-gray if I'm working on a bust to make it look more realistic. When I had the whites of the bust's eyes a little bit brighter, it actually looked like she was staring. It really looked weird. So I had to darken them down a bit, and then everything looked great. So these paints are thinned about a 4:1. I'm using them fairly thick because I don't want to have to layer this up. I want these paints to cover right away so that the eyes don't become even a worse trial to paint than they normally are. And I'm going to be using a small brush, smaller than usual. This is a 00 Windsor Newton Series 7. It has a very, very good tip. It's a bit more narrow than my normal brush. And painting eyes is where brush unloading comes into play big time, because you need to be able to control that paint, right? So you need to be able to just do a little bit of a brush stroke and not have the paint flood everywhere. So I'm loading my brush up about a third of the way, and then I'm unloading it, dabbing it off against the side of the palette so that I can make this stripe over the eye. Now, how I want to do this is that I'm going to be actually taking in a breath and then letting it out in a long exhale, and I'm going to hold it at the end. This ensures that I'm relaxed at the time when I make the brush stroke. If you take in a breath and hold it, you're going to tense up, and you don't want to tense. Like, even if you clamp down on your brush because you're scared of like painting the eyes, that can be enough to really make you shake and not have good control. So you want to be relaxed when you're painting this. So when you hear me, before I paint any of these details, you're going to hear me taking a breath, and I'm going to take it, I'm going to let it out, and then I'm going to hold it while I paint. So, in, and then out, and then paint. Go. And you want to see that dark rim. The reason we fill in the eye with the walnut first is that we want to see that dark rim around the eye. If you don't have it, the eye tends to just look like it's staring. That's how you get the miniatures that look really scared. So having that dark rim is really helps your eye to stand out and be separate from the face. For the other eye, you can either go over the nose, as I'm doing here because her nose is tiny, or if there's a little bit more of obstruction here, you can turn the model upside down and paint from that direction. And exhale and paint. Now I am using my paint slightly thinned, but not as much as you might think, because I want it to cover and I want to be able to get this color down without a lot of going over it again and again and again and again and again. So I'm using actually more of a 4:1, even sometimes a little bit less. That said, I still am thinning it a little, and if I need to go over these eyeballs again and again to get them right, it's okay. I can probably redo these 12 times before I start to lose detail. I just would paint in the whole orbit with the walnut again, and then I would try the white again. And if I messed up the pupil, same thing. I would just cover it up with the white, and I would try it again until it worked. So persistence is the key. Now when we're doing the pupils, I'm not going to do a colored iris, and the reason is that I find them to be kind of I don't know, kind of useless on a 28 millimeter. If your model has big enough eyes that it can show up, sure, you can do it. But these eyes are so small that there's really just not a good way to make a colored iris show up at all. You might be able to see it under extreme magnification if you paint one, but you won't be able to like see it in person. I just don't find them to really work very well. The painters I know who used to do colored irises on 28s, they would actually kind of paint in that rim around the eye that I've done in dark, and then they would do an extra line around it. Like they would artificially enlarge the eye with paint in order to be able to pull off that colored iris. Or the couple times when I've managed to do them on 28s, it's usually on models that have really big eyes like Werner Klock sculpts. And even then, like I couldn't really see it just holding it in my hand. I had to get out my magnification to see it. So it's up to you whether you want to do it. Some painters make it work. I find on a 28, usually these days, I find with this size of eyes, it's just not worth it. And the other thing about doing this size of eyes is trying to get the pupil and iris in the center can just give you a cat's eye look. Like you could even see that when I put the brush down. Like there's not a lot of room here to make an actual circle. And so one way around that, a common way that many painters will use, myself included, is to make the model looking off to the side so that you only have to leave white on one side of the pupil and iris, and you can fill the rest of the eye. It's a lot easier to have your model looking to the side, and it gets rid of the cat's eye syndrome that you can otherwise get with these tiny eyes when you're trying to do a regular pupil. So let me try. Again, inhale, exhale, and paint. So you can see that eye, I mean, it's just tiny. It's so tiny. The placement's right, but if I try to enlarge that at all, I'm going to totally eclipse the white. So that's when I'm just like, all right, I'm going to make her looking off to the side because otherwise it's just not going to work. The other thing I do when I'm painting, as you saw, I came up from underneath, and I use that upper eyelid to stop the brush. And then it deposits that little bit. I can try to fill this out. I'm going to try one more time, see if I can manage to make it work. Inhale, exhale, paint. Nope. Yeah, see, now she's started to look off to the side, so I'm just going to lean into that. So that we can only see, and that looks cool, actually. So I'll do the other eye the same. Again, go up from below. There we go. So that's great. Now I was messing with her eyebrows earlier, which is why this looks a little bit weird up here. Before I had a hard shadow under them, and it made the eyebrows look like they actually existed. Here I've covered over them with fair skin, so they're really just like this void above her eyes, and that's fine. The other thing I want to cover is like catch lights. You can try to do a catch light in eyes this small, putting that little white dot of reflected light, but it often will just kind of come in and make it look like you have a white of the eye instead. Like it won't work. We can try it. But yeah, see, it just looks like I brought in the white of the eye on that side of the eye again. So not as effective. I don't know. Let's try the other one. It's not terrible. Sometimes I can manage it. So it worked this time, kind of, and I probably would keep those, but often it doesn't. And so there's no shame in just leaving the eyes dark and not putting a catch light in. I got lucky, I think, on that one. Often I find that it really doesn't work. But this is looking okay. It's obvious she's still looking to the side. I feel like this side is a little bit, might be more dicey, but we'll keep it. We'll keep it. So that's how you do it. Again, and in this time, you're just like taking your white, getting most of it off your brush, and then you've got to go up again and hit the bottom of the eyelid right at the right point. But you're not even trying to put, you're not putting very much paint down at all. You're not even putting as much paint down as you did with the pupil and iris. So it can be very difficult. But when you do this, get your brush wet, full of water, and just kind of pull the water out so there's still moisture in the brush. Then get your white paint on the very tip. What will happen is the moisture in the brush will keep that white paint wet a little longer. Otherwise, if your brush is really dry and you try to put a really fine speck of white on that tip of your brush, chances are it's going to dry before it even gets to the eyeball. So leaving that moisture in your brush can help. And this white is about a 4-to-1 paint to water. All right, let's do these eyebrows. They are sculpted on, but that can actually be a little bit annoying. So sometimes I'll paint them in, but they'll usually look too big, and then I'll end up having to narrow them. So I try to start at the inner part of the eye here, where the start of the brow is. If they're really well sculpted, sometimes you can use the side of your brush to get them. That's good. That's a nice kind of eyebrow raised kind of look, isn't it? But more often it's like you're painting freehand. So it can be just as annoying as any kind of freehand is. And we'll get the other one. So yeah, don't be afraid. Keep your skin tone open. I've got fair skin already mixed up. I know I can touch this up if it goes bad. Keep it like a safety net. Know that you may screw it up and you may not like it and you may have to doctor it a bit. These actually turned out pretty well. See, just I'm warning you guys that this can be terrible and awful and you can screw it up totally. I managed to pull it off and make it not look nearly as bad as it is, but it's bad, trust me. I'm really, the jury is out on whether I think it's better to have a sculpted eyebrow or a not sculpted eyebrow. David prefers them not to be sculpted on. I think I'm okay with them being sculpted on, but they do tend to look a little bit thick sometimes. So you can always take a little bit of your skin colored paint and try to thin them down a bit as well if you end up in that situation. The end out here forks a little bit, so I'm going to grab my skin tone and just try to touch that up. Narrow it down. That looks a little sharper. I like that. Now she looks really clever, doesn't she? She's glancing off to the side, raising her eyebrow at somebody. So yeah, so there you go. That would be eyeballs. So remember, taking your breath, exhale, relax, hold it at the end and paint, right? Have your brush all loaded up, inhale, and then paint. Paint when you're relaxed. Support your fingers so that you don't shake. I'm often supporting one hand on this and the other hand on the model down here. Come at it from an angle that's comfortable for you. So whatever, this is my natural way. I tend to hold the brush, so coming at it from this angle is just perfect for me. Make sure your paint is thinned a little bit, but not too much, because too much can mean, one, that it takes you forever to unload your brush, and that it's going to be runny and hard to keep control of. Finally, remember, you can always redo it. If you're using thin paint, you can paint over this whole face 12 times before you start to lose detail. You have time. you have the ability to just take your time and to redo if you have to. Just go into it. Like, I went into it with all this mixed up. I knew that I might mess it up. So for me, it's like, that kind of takes the pressure off. I'm like, all right, I know I'm going to screw this up at least once, so I'm going to have all my paints mixed up, right? And just kind of roll your eyes at yourself and go, all right, let's go. And some days the eyes are just not going to be there. Like, as my CrossFit coach says, you know, he's like, yeah, some days doing double under jump rope has left the building. Like, some days for you, eyeballs will have left the building. And if they have left the building, just like paint something else. Like, just block in something on another model if you have to. Your fine motor won't always be 100%. If you've done like something really, like a lot of exertion earlier in the day, if you've had too much caffeine, if you've had too little sleep, if you've just had a really rough day and focusing on tiny details is just really hard for you today. You know, if you're sick or in pain or anything like that, the fine motor may abandon you. And just like put it aside, go back to it on the next day. If you find that you shake a lot in the morning, but it's better in the evening, you know, then paint this kind of thing in the evening. So whatever the case may be with you, if you find that you're getting frustrated, just back off. Do something else for the night. Come back to it the next time you have time to paint. It's gonna be there. It's okay. Even I have days where I try to do eyes or fine details and it's just not there for me. So I'll just take a break. I'll do something else. Thanks everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this series on 28mm faces, and I'll be back at you soon in January with another video, maybe color theory, maybe some metallics, something like that, like shaded metallics. That would be fun. I just put out another video on kind of a channel update on why my schedule's been so wonky, but also like kind of what I'm hoping to return to in January. So go and give that a watch if you have a moment, if you care. Otherwise, I'll just see you around. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you watching, and this is Anne signing off.